It a story that been told and retold by poets and actors for thousands of years, but is it real? Welcome to Hidden Chronicles, and today we counting down our picks for the top 20 historical mysteries that have been solved. No trace of the soldiers has ever been found until now after 13 years of research and 5 expeditions to the desert. 2 top Italian archaeologists claim to have found the first evidence for the lost army of campuses. For this list we're looking at the most puzzling questions in history that have likely been answered with modern-day discoveries. What do you make of these answers? Let us know in the comments below. Number 20. King Tut Tomb. This simple tomb is unlike any other royal tomb in the valley. A young man named Tutankhamun ruled ancient Egypt between 1332 and 1323 BC. You may have heard of him by the early 20th century. Experts theorize that Tutankhamun was buried in the Valley of the Kings alongside other pharaohs, but the location of his tomb remained elusive. By 1912 it was believed that every tomb had been accounted for except for King Tut. So where the heck was it? Enter Howard Carter, who hit the jackpot in 1922. Over 5,000 priceless artifacts including golden statues in the burial chamber. The pharaoh mummy wearing a golden death mask was placed inside a coffin made of more than 200 pounds of solid gold. Unlike other royal graves which have been cut into the valley slopes, Tut's was dug into the ground and hidden by debris. Carter work unveiled not only the location of King Tut tomb, but also why no one else had been able to find it. Number 19. The Connecticut Vampire. The greater New England area suffered a vampire panic back in the 19th century, and this was exemplified through the burial of J.B. 55. This code name was spelled out in brass tacks on the man coffin, and his skull and femurs were placed in the shape of a traditional skull and crossbones. The body and arranging its bones in such a way was a historic method of big. So did we have a real genuine one on our hands? Of course not. There were a set of circumstances that were interpreted as vampire attacks, and people acted on the belief that these were vampire attacks. The vampire never existed. A DNA test done in 2019 identified this vampire as John Barber, aged 55, hence JB 55. Barber had most likely died of tuberculosis, which gives people vampire symptoms like pale skin, red eyes, and a bloody mouth. You better hold on tight. Spider monkey. Number 18. Blood Falls. Antarctica contains a startling image. Blood Falls is a bit of an obsession for a lot of people. I mean, there nothing else like this on Earth. Well, the whole continent is pretty darn startling, but we're talking specifically about Blood Falls, found in southern Antarctica. In the Taylor Glacier is a small cascade of what looks like deep red blood. This was discovered by the glacier namesake Thomas Griffith Taylor in 1911. Of course no one genuinely believed it was blood, yet no one knew what it actually was. For a long time the leading theory was that red algae was responsible for the distinct color. The red color is similar to in the Grand Canyon. If you've been to the Grand Canyon you'll notice that a lot of the rocks are dyed a dark red color, and that because there's iron in those rocks and that iron oxidizes or rusts. However, recent analysis has proven that the bold red comes from the presence of iron oxide. The iron salts inside the subglacial water oxidize when they reach the surface, changing the liquid from clear to red. Number 17. Ancient Viking code. There a lot to find fascinating about Vikings, including their system of writing. Like many ancient texts, the Jotunvitler, a rare Norse code which dates back to the 12th or 13th century, left experts puzzled for years. It wasn't until 2014 that K. Jonas Nerdy at the University of Oslo figured it out. The Jotunvitler had popped up on many rune sticks, but the one from which Nerdy was able to decipher it, which he calls his Rosetta Stone, was located at Bergen Wharf, Norway. What made these runes so hard to crack was that they were coded, likely owing to their use as an educational tool. There nothing juicy in the writings, but cracking an ancient code is still incredibly exciting. Number 16. The Star Child Skull. During all my years of researching UFOs, the one artifact that keeps coming up is the Star Child Skull. I've never held the Star Child Skull in my hand, but I know that it was found in the 1930s in a cave in northern Mexico by a teenage girl. It's amazing how often conditions and diseases are misattributed to the supernatural. We've seen it with the Connecticut Vampire, and we see it again with the so-called Star Child. The distinct skull of the Star Child was obtained by paranormal author Lloyd Pye, who asserted that it belonged to a human-alien hybrid. This news captured our collective imaginations, but it really an unfortunate labeling of a tragic reality. Tests done in the late 90s and early 2000s proved that the skull belonged to a young human male. Sorry believers, no aliens here. Furthermore, Yale neurologist Stephen Novella attributed the cranial deformations to hydrocephalus, a condition in which cerebrospinal fluid accumulates in the brain and enlarges the head. Number 15. The Lost Army of Cambyses. Serving as the second king of kings of the Achaemenid Empire, Cambyses II ruled from 530 to 522 BC. Legend has it that in 524 Cambyses sent a massive army against the oracle of Ammonius in the Siwa oasis. However, the army was accosted by a devastating sandstorm and all 50,000 men were lost for a long time. The veracity of this tale was questioned, as its primary source was the Greek historian Herodotus, who has been known to, shall we say, dramatize certain events for the Persians. This must have been a huge burden. Virtually certain that Cambyses' army could not have been as vast as fast as Ed, but in 2009 archaeologists Angelo and Alfredo Castiglione found human remains and Persian belongings near the Siwa oasis. Finally, lending credence to the story, many have searched for this army, but all have searched along the oasis route, the oasis of Dakla. For Rafra Indala, then across the desert up to Siwa. We worked on a different hypothesis since these oases were under the Egyptian rule. However, it is important to note that some experts doubt the findings of the Castigliones. Number 14. The Flying Dutchman. Probably heard of the Flying Dutchman, as it been featured extensively in art, television and film, including the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. That the Flying Dutch, she doesn't look like much. This is an alleged ghost ship that inspired many a tall tale, with the legend dating back to the 18th century. It said that the Flying Dutchman floats above the water and contains a crew of cursed and undead sailors. Reports of the ship even stretched into the 20th century, and that because optical illusions are timeless. Yup, the Flying Dutchman is not one ship but the result of an optical illusion called Fata Morgana. Essentially, some ships on the distant horizon look like they're floating owing to how light travels through different layers of air. When there is what known as an inversion layer in the atmosphere, typically the temperature of the air gets cooler as you go from the ground upwards, but when there is an inversion layer, the air near the ground is coolest and there warm air above it. Number 13. The city of Troy. And speaking of legends, it doesn't get much bigger than the Trojan War, a favorite subject of ancient Greek literature. The Trojan War details the invasion of Troy by the Achaeans. Many scholars debate the history of the war itself, and for a long time they debated the location of Troy as well. Most thought it was merely a place of legend, but that viewpoint changed thanks to Heinrich Schliemann and Frank Calvert. In 1871 the archaeologists began excavations in present-day historic Turkey and discovered not one city but 9 Schliemann, with his interest in Homer, was not the first in this area. Frank Calvert, a British expatriate, had been living in the area from 1845 onward. He grew up in this area and gradually amassed a tremendous amount of textual evidence for where Troy lay. Each city was built on the ruins of the last, resulting in numerous distinct layers labeled by Roman numerals. It now widely believed that Troy 6 is the one depicted in the Greek myth. History can never confirm if Homer heroes ever lived nor whether the legendary Trojan horse ever existed, but thanks to modern archaeology the city in which Homer placed his heroes, the lost city of Troy, is lost no more. Number 12. The Easter Island heads. The Moai, as they're properly known, are some of the most recognizable monuments in the world populating Easter Island and Polynesia. The Moai were carved in a volcanic crater called Reino Raraku. The Moai are considered to be no more than perhaps 1,000 years old. However, it has been established that some of them penetrate down into the ground by a great amount of fate to reveal the rest of the body, not just the oversized head, and the amount of patination suggests that they are infinitely older than 1,000 years. They were then transported to the outer perimeter of the island, where they rested on platforms called ahu. We don't really know how the natives moved the statues, and for a long time we didn't know why they chose the sites they did. Well, that particular question was solved in 2019 by researchers at Binghamton University. They discovered that the ahu were placed near sources of fresh drinking water because that where communities were inclined to settle it. Not dramatic, but it sure is practical. Scientists are continually uncovering more of this history. But it is already clear that this was a remarkably complex society of which the Moai were only one part. Number 11. The classic Maya collapse. In the span of human history, the Maya collapse wasn't all that long ago, with the last city falling to Spanish settlers in 1697, but another major collapse occurred earlier, with most of the major Maya cities being abandoned between the 7th and 9th centuries. The reason for this is one of history's greatest unanswered questions. Well, it was until 2012. Turns out a number of Factors went into the collapse, as it so often does. They set up the city on the most fertile agricultural lands down on the bottomlands that the river had carved out and made fertile over the centuries. By doing so, they were basically cutting off their own food supply. They weren't able to farm the best lands. They were then obliged to cut down the forest on the slopes. In doing so, that caused erosion, as they had to cut back even higher up. The Maya greatly deforested the surrounding area, which exacerbated an ongoing drought and killed all agriculture in the region. Furthermore, trade routes had changed from land to sea and impacting local economies and forcing a relocation from the southern lowlands to the northern Yucatan. Number 10. The fate of the Franklin expedition. Captain Sir John Franklin. Arctic exploration expedition was lost after leaving England in 1845. Franklin was searching for a shortcut from Europe to Asia through the Northwest Passage. His ships were caught in the crushing Arctic ice and abandoned off King William Island. Over the years, many other ships set out to see if they could find out what happened to the doomed crew. It a part of a human skull, and I think it at point one of brightness. Men like it related to prime management, so part of the skull is broken, but this the top part. While some clues were found, including grave sites of some of the men who had been aboard, it was only at the end of the 20th century that we began to get answers about what had caused Franklin and his team so much trouble. Unfortunately, we discovered that many of the crew members did not die quickly, but rather succumbed to diseases like scurvy and even lead poisoning after becoming icebound. And sadly, the rumors of cannibalism were also proved to be true. The previous actions of the British crew had been erratic, even dangerous. After all, they had been eating each other. Number 9. Mysterious notes in the Odyssey. Homer. Epic Greek poem The Odyssey has become known as one of the most important pieces in the history of literature. While there are many things that we still don't know about the story creation, an extra layer of mystery was added when a copy was found with unintelligible notes in the margin. The copy belonged to the University of Chicago Library and was a Venetian edition from 1504. The library created a contest to see if anyone could crack the code, and Italian computer engineer Daniela Mattli figured it out with help from colleague Giulia Chetta. Turns out the notes were written in a French shorthand and dated from the 19th century. Number 8. King Richard III. Death. While his legacy has lived on through Shakespeare, King Richard III of England was the final English king to perish in battle. In fact, his death during the Battle of Bosworth Field is often used to mark the end of the Middle Ages. It was here in the Midlands, on the battlefield at Bosworth during the War of the Roses, that he fell. The hunchback, so-called villain king, was cut down on the pointy end of his successor sword, but his remains were lost and only uncovered in 2012 during an archaeological excavation of Leicester. The position of the spine in the grave was interesting. There was a very noticeable curve in it, and that not something that can occur just by accident, that not something that can happen just by squashing the skeleton into the grave. The following year the body was identified as belonging to Richard III. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the academic conclusion of the University of Leicester that beyond reasonable doubt the individual exhumed at Greyfriars in September 2012 is indeed Richard III, the last Plantagenet king of England. He had suffered 11 wounds. He lost his helmet in battle, leading to his demise. Number 7. The sailing stones. Known as sailing stones or moving rocks, observers have long noticed the enigmatic phenomenon of these objects that seemingly move on their own, leaving trails in their wake. The most famous example is found at Racetrack Playa in California. Death Valley National Park. Many experiments have been undertaken in an attempt to understand how these large objects move, and we now seem to have an answer. When ice breakup takes place, when the ice begins to melt just enough under the light breezes that big ice sheets drive the rocks in front of them and just plow them along the bottom of this shallow pond. On cold nights, thin sheets of ice develop under them and then float and are able to be moved by the wind, which propels the rocks as fast as 5 meters per minute. Rocks move through a combination of a shallow pond, ice, light breezes and sun to set them in motion. Number 6. The face on Mars. Between the Arandis crater and the Bamboo crater in the Cydonia region of Mars, spacecraft Viking 1 captured an image in 1976 that has fueled speculation for decades that because it looked for all intents and purposes like there was a face on the red planet, while people wanted to use this as evidence of an alien civilization, the actual explanation is a banal one: music. I'm not gonna have that thing in my house. Scientists have agreed that the face is essentially an optical illusion and that it Only present based on the angle from which you view it and how well lit it is. Number 5. The location of the USS Indianapolis. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis is among the greatest tragedies that the American Navy has ever experienced. Foreign torpedoed by a Japanese submarine in 1945 during a mission to deliver parts of the nuclear weapon. Little boy, there were only 316 survivors from a crew of 1195. And I looked back at that time and she was up on her bow going down in 12 minutes. The ship was gone. The wreck remained unfound despite several expeditions to locate it, but in 2016 new information was revealed that gave us a better clue of where it might be, and in 2017 a team funded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen finally found the well-preserved remains of the ship. New images both haunting and revealing that an unbelievable amount of damage from that torpedo. So the devastation caused by 2 Japanese torpedoes that hammered the USS Indianapolis on July 30, 1945 while en route to the Philippines. Number 4. How the pyramids were built. The Egyptian pyramids are one of Earth's most widely recognizable landmarks. Many secrets about these magnificent structures remain built to its day and eternity. They seem in no hurry to reveal them, but for many years people wondered how they were possibly built without modern technology. Was it aliens? Well, probably not. It had already been known that the Egyptians likely used wooden sleds to drag large objects across the sand, but researchers at the University of Amsterdam added a probable solution to make this even easier. They established that by wetting sand only slightly it would create the perfect amount of friction to carry very heavy objects easily. Wetting with the right amount of water makes it remarkably slick. A team of 10 workers can easily pull a 1-ton sled, but people always seem to forget that Egyptians had animals like donkeys and cattle around to help. 2. Another ancient Egyptian mystery that has a more clear-cut answer is the hieroglyphs that seemingly depict modern helicopters. Turns out these are a product of the stone being reused for more than one image. Number 3. What caused the Tunguska event? In a remote area of Russia in 1908 a massive explosion took place that flattened tens of millions of trees and produced an estimated 185 times more energy than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Millions of pine trees, larches and birches are destroyed by the pressure wave and the fires. A shock wave circles the world, leaving its mark on seismographs everywhere. But no one can understand where it has come from. It inevitably left many wondering what had caused it. For decades people have speculated that it might have been an asteroid, a comet, a clash of matter and antimatter, or even an alien spaceship landing. The night sky was illuminated for weeks after, and people were able to read their newspapers in the middle of the night from London to Asia. But in 2013 it was essentially confirmed that it was in fact a meteor when a team from the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine analyzed rock samples of meteoric origin from the site. Researchers studied microscopic fragments of decayed vegetation dating back to the time of the event and discovered mineral combinations perfectly consistent with other meteorite impact sites like the 50,000-year-old meteor crater in Arizona. Number 2. The Bermuda Triangle. While some of the other mysteries on our list may not be commonly known to the general public, nearly everyone heard of the Bermuda Triangle. For many years people have wondered about the evils at work here that seemingly make boats sink and planes fall from the sky. Ships that have shown up absolutely empty, no sign of any struggle, and yet the crew has just vanished. But the explanation is simple and unexciting. While some may imagine the triangle as a small and special specific area, actually a huge and not well-defined region that is heavily trafficked by sea and by air. Bermuda is surrounded by a network of reefs. Like stunning reef, they come right to the surface, and when ships encounter those, they literally break them apart. If you go back in time to your old wooden ships and stuff like that, those ships had no chance. In fact, your cruise ship may have sailed right through it without you noticing. Yes, plenty of accidents have occurred there, but they largely have logical explanations. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them if you're on your phone. Make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Anastasia. Escape. In 1918 the Russian Imperial Romanov family was executed by communist revolutionaries, but for years rumors persisted that Tsar Nicholas II's youngest daughter Anastasia somehow survived and escaped. So whether it sympathetic God had rescued one of them, it not beyond the realms of possibility. It didn't help that several women throughout history have impersonated the supposedly missing princess. The genetic testing proved beyond all reasonable doubt that Anna Anderson was not Anastasia Romanov. The whole thing was fabricated. Whoever she was, she certainly wasn't a member of the Russian royal family. These speculations were fueled when the Romanov grave was found in 1991 and 2 bodies were seemingly missing, but by 2007 another grave site had been found nearby and DNA evidence conclusively proved that all members of the family are accounted for. A sad ending to the tale for those who prefer to hold out hope of her survival, but the DNA evidence makes it clear that what really happened on the night when Russia longest-lived dynasty came to its abrupt and bloody end. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from Hidden Chronicles and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.